Hey, it's Chris. 5 games, as quick as I can go, giving you the most information about these hot games that you need to know. Whether or not they're right for you, pros, cons, everything else in between, all smacked into one video. You ready? Buckle up. Let's go. First up here, we're talking about Maximum Apocalypse. Now, this is the Wasted Wild version. If you're not familiar with this, this is sort of like a Dead of Winter meets Euro style game, if you will, a little bit of Pandemic thrown in there. And it always worries me when I pull out a game and there are 3 rule books to go along with it. Now, twist though, this is actually great because one is just a supplemental mission log, one is a full rule book, and one is a learn to how to play the game in the first place. And it's done smoothly, and it really focuses on what you need to know in this game as you're taking your 4 actions per turn, slowly exploring and traveling over these tiles, revealing them along the way, scavenging as you go, and taking actions as you're trying to, well, you know, potentially on one of the 7 or so missions that are in this game, achieve what you need to as you go along with monsters, wilderness, and allies along the way that you're going to be dealing with. You can see here it's a little bit of Dead of Winter in the sense that you have 3 decks you're going to be scavenging from that are going to correspond to, say, the tiles you're going to be going in. And as you explore these tiles, you can start to see they've got the scavenge color that represents the deck that you're going to be going from. But also, now this is the Dead of Winter-esque, Pandemic-esque style, is you have these dice that you're going to be rolling on a turn-by-turn basis here. And as you do these dice, you spawn monsters to the die number of the tile that matches. And so as you're going to be building these up, they're not going to be revealed yet until you go on an area that's going to have them as you go along, and how you maneuver them, how you manipulate them, and also inevitably how you fight them with one of your asymmetric character decks here. That's where the beauty of the elegance of this game is. And the thing I love about this game, right? Look at this. This is a thick deck of cards right here. This is awesome because you're going to be going through and you're going to be doing crazy cool things. And if you're like me and you prefer the thief as your main person, you have all sorts of things, including things like backstabbing, silence pistols, into the shadows, assassinate, and grappling hooks. Yeah, it just freaking works as you're drawing your cards on your 4 actions per turn. Anything from moving, fighting, playing, or manipulating what's on the board. And so, for example, say the first mission, you have to kill 2 bears, you have to get fuel back over to the van, you have to deal with monsters spawning from this massive monster deck, and you're going to have the ability to modularly customize each mission if you want. Say, for example, this setup right here, you don't like that shape, do your own shape. You just have to have certain things from certain distances and certain patterns achieved, but it doesn't have to be done in a unique way every time. So it's going to give you a completely different dynamic, because also these tiles are going to vary in a mission by mission basis. You pull the deck of enemies based on what the scenario gives, and you may have 4 or 5 different options, or even mishmashing in terms of being able to ally against some or being hostile against others. And these enemies are relatively straightforward. They have health, they do damage, and they deal damage or have other abilities down at the bottom here, depending on what animal they are. So you're going to be having to deal with them as they attach to you as you go along through this map. You're going to be slowly maneuvering through both the environment, that are going to be cards that are going to do you on a turn by turn or potentially round by round, depending on your roll, because as you roll this, as you move along, this little tracker right here slowly reveals different parts of the day that are going to have different actions and different effects that you're going to have to deal with. Tribe cards, environment, everything else along the way. And so you're also going to be having to deal with these about what's going to happen, a little bit of Dead of Winter-esque in the events as you maneuver around. So does it work? Yeah, pros. This is actually, you know, probably one of the most under the radar great games I've played in a long time. It's a cooperative, basically post-apocalyptic, Dead of Winter-esque, more realistic. I say that as I realize 2 of the characters are like the beekeeper and the time traveler, so maybe not totally realistic there, but it takes the deck building, card playing action and utilizes it in a pandemic Dead of Winter style that, frankly speaking, is very refreshing. And I like the modular setup. I really enjoy the mixing and matching of a lot of these aspects. And the mission log, I mean, it's challenging, but it isn't going to be over the top, something like Last Bastion either. It's going to be harder than Dead of Winter. It's not going to make you feeling half empty when the cooperative element is thrown out the window when you have a traitor. You don't have to worry about those aspects of things, and you don't have to go searching around for all the good stuff. The good stuff that you have, whether you're the time traveler, which is my other favorite because it's a freaking time traveler, or the thief here, you get to do really cool things. And that's the best part about games, right? You don't want the cool stuff locked behind a wall or at the very end of the game. You want to be able to do cool stuff as you adventure across the board. And, you know, even with the dice mechanic, You know, it gives you plenty of ways to mitigate the monsters and move them around and manipulate them so that you're not just trying to, you know, smash, bang, smash, bang. It's actually some thought process more from a Euro element, which again sets it a little bit apart from those other ones I mentioned. Cons? Well, I mean, yeah, if you don't like dice, if you don't like the randomness of a deck, that's going to get in your way from that aspect of things. The environment is going to be completely random. You have lots of decks here that you can't necessarily mitigate. And sometimes you're going to get a bad roll. You're going to get a bad card. You're not going to get the one you need. And again, with this type of game, is that a make it or break it for you? If you're looking at it in the first place, it shouldn't be. Inevitably, those are the things you're going to run into that are going to stall or prevent you from actually achieving your end goal in the first place. Is that a make it or break it? No, it's not. Cons, I mean, it's grindy. You know, you are going to be going through a lot of cards in your deck. One of the lose conditions is actually run out of cards. And I just showed you how many cards I have. So if I'm going to lose, how long could this potentially be? And that's probably the biggest downside is that, you know, as you grind, as you basically spawn monsters all the time, you're going to be having to, you know, constantly fend them off, constantly fight them, constantly deal with that, constantly trying to back and forth. And the grindy, dumb, chaotic nature of this sometimes may not be the most appealing when you're not looking for something as deep strategy wise. So yeah, it's going to give it to you a little bit more in that sense, but it's also not going to be as gentle if you're looking for something a little bit more mind numbing in a good way on an easier game night. There are some minor wording issues. There are a few of those errata issues that still plague this as a couple times around the block already style of game. It's a little rough around the edges with some of those. It's nothing make it or break it, but it's enough to make you go, okay, if I'm not enjoying it as much as I would like, that can sometimes break your immersion when you have other games that are more streamlined and more straightforward with less of that in the first place, like your Pandemics or your Dead of Winters. And so that's the element of things that you have to know, and you have to weigh for yourself to know, okay, am I going to like all of these elements? Am I going to like dealing with this and this and this and this and this? Because again, on a lighter game night, that's too much. And on a heavier game night, it works out great. The biggest pro, again, are these characters. They're asymmetric, they're lovely, they're wonderful. The dynamics that each of them bring in a unique way is tremendous. But also, the repetition of the whole game pattern as a whole doesn't fare far enough away from your typical Pandemic or Dead of Winter either to necessarily separate it or elevate it at the same time. And that's going to be your dilemma of saying, okay, which one is truly my flavor of co-op, if you will. So all in all, with what it's offering, is it a keeper at this point? I don't really know. I go back and forth on it because some nights, again, I don't feel like playing something quite as heavy as this, but other nights it really does give a different element of things. And so time will ultimately tell whether or not it's just too much of a modularity mix-up or a testing of time cooperative game that stands on its own. Next up, we have Legends of Void from Twoid Games. This is Terraforming Mars in the fantasy world on steroids. If Terraforming Mars was too simple for you, if you didn't think there was enough iconography, mishmashing of mechanics, and game length as a whole, this one is one you should heavily look at. It brings to you hand management, area control, and engine building, but you got to be quick on your feet because this one is also going to leave you reeling. If you can't manage your resources properly, you will be left high and dry. And especially as an engine building game, that is potentially both a turn on from a heavy Euro side of things, but it's also a turn off if you're not the most action optimized in the first place. You can notice that even behind me on the board here, behind all of these different stacks of cards, behind the complex player boards of the 4 seasons you're going to be going through on a turn-by-turn basis, trying to banish evil seraphs from invading and taking over the land and creating more void, there is a lot of stuff going on. This game has tons of variability and modularity just in the setup, right? You choose 6 of these 8 random pizza tiles, if you will, that are all double-sided. It gives you a new board every time you set it up. You're drafting from seraphs, you're drafting from blessings, you're drafting from characters, you're drafting very heavily in this game, very reminiscent of Terraforming Mars in the first place. You're going to have all of this going on in the sense that you're going to have many cards and many different modularity set up here, all in the base game. You have your blessings, you have your enemies, you have all of your characters. You're going to be choosing a fraction of those in every single game to mix, match, engine build, speed race to knock these seraphs off before the end of the game. Draft faction, draft lumen scrolls, draft regular magic scrolls. Drafting is very heavy on a round by round basis. You're only going to see a fraction of the cards. You're only going to get even smaller fraction of the cards. And therein lies both the dilemma in the blessing and the curse of this game. If iconography was a game, this one is one of the heaviest I've ever played in that sense. This is the player aid that runs you through a little bit of what you need to know. But even on these cards, as you can see underneath, there is a lot of potential arrows, diagrams, pictures that you're going to be having to interpret and sort of figure out. And once you learn it, it's fine, but let's not kid ourselves here. This learning curve, this is probably the biggest learning curve of a game I have ever played. And that's both great if you're looking for something between a 3.5 and a 4 weight on Board Game Geek that'll take you 50 minutes per player or so. But if you're also looking for something along the lines of Terraforming Mars, and that attraction by the comparison is of your ilk, don't be fooled though, this is nothing like it at the same time. So you run through your 4 seasons, right? You've got your drafting, and then you've got your actions, and then you've got your production, and then the bad guys go. You're going to be dealing with potentially up to 9 different resources though that you're going to be, converting, mixing, matching, appealing, engine building with at the same time. And that's a lot of overhead to go along. And when it hums, it really sings nicely. But when it doesn't, it falters and it leaves you a little bit feeling empty at the same time, sort of like the void in the first place. The great thing, like several of the others of the heavier cooperative ilk now, you can play solo, you can play competitive, you can also play cooperative. What your preferred mode may ultimately determine whether or not this game is for you in terms of how heavy and how long it's going to take you to operate this. Again, not a bad thing, but it's just got so much going on. Sometimes there can be too much of a good thing. I mean, the artwork is absolutely fantastic. These cards are top notch. There has been so much effort put into this in the first place. I can't discount that this is a game of love. And you can just note that, look at this. This is so pretty and so overwhelming at the same time if you're looking at this as, oh, what am I going to do with this? What on earth is going on? And it both brings joy and trepidatiousness at the same time with some of these. And don't get me wrong, they do an absolutely tremendous job as they actually lay out in this 40-page rulebook, take that for what you will, a lot of how these things actually work. So in case you're confused, it literally allows you to look up pretty much everything in terms of actions and abilities that you may ever possibly want to know in this game. So interpretation is actually done incredibly well. At the same time, that's a lot to be looking up all the time, and that sometimes leads to the burden of the time length in the first place. Otherwise, it's very familiar to Terraforming Mars aficionados. You are going to be going through manipulating the spaces on this board, utilizing your production, gathering, avoiding, doing damage towards the seraphs as you're trying to win the game in the first place by knocking them out. The AI of the seraphs running around and teleporting around the map, to frustrate you and to deny you the win condition is an absolutely tremendous mechanic. I love the AI system. I love the combo building. But at times, unless you are looking for a 3 to 4 hour game-ish, probably streamline a little bit less than that in the future once you have about half a dozen games under your belt, it's going to work really well. But as someone who typically doesn't do well with that type of length of game, it pushed me to my limits. So it's probably not ultimately going to stay in my collection just because the barrier to entry, not for myself even necessarily, but for those I play with, this is an ultimate, you need to play it many times to get the full grasp of what the designers have in store. What they have in store is an absolutely fabulous buried treasure, but you're gonna have to dig for it and you're gonna have to dig deep. And that's not going to, fit as well with people nowadays or even in general, because again, if this was a 2-hour game, again, too much of a good thing. It reminds me a little bit sometimes of the Awakened Realms games in that sense, where there's just so much that you wanted to put in the game that 1 or 2 things less is truly more. I mean, this is a love letter to board gaming. That's what this screams on the table. Sometimes throwing everything you want in the game can also be a little bit of a detriment in the same sense because, too much of a good thing, if you will, just like candy. Now, slightly smaller table presence here. Between Two Cities, the Essential Edition, Stonemaier Games. I'm going to make an argument right now. This is actually a relatively freaking good game at a player count that is often hard to do. At really, I feel weird saying this, but it's a 4 to 5 player game. And I don't have a ton of things in my collection that play 4 to 5 players. And essentially what you're doing is you're just simultaneously drafting these square tiles, and you have 2 cities between you and your opponents. And so what you're going to be doing is you're going to be slowly, cooperatively laying these tiles as you draft them 2 at a time, 1 on the city on one side, 1 on the city on the other. And then you're just going to basically have a different pattern set collection tile laying aspect in this game in order to score the most victory points. at the end. But it's going to be the city that actually has the least amount of points is the one that you get as your endgame score. So therein lies the dilemma of your essentially 6 different types of tiles here. How do you position them in a king domino-like manner as you have a basic tenor tile that you're going to be having aligned in your 5x5 grid? You have to utilize all the spaces on it. You cannot have it any portion hanging over, and you're going to be slowly filling and, you know, using these adjacent bridges as well as these 4 spaces that are asymmetrically different in all of the cities in order to maximize the scoring, to be cooperative with the person next to you and competitive with everyone else that's not next to you. Does it work? Actually, yeah, it's freaking good. I like it. I really like it a lot more than I thought I would. The scoring of the set conditions here is relatively straightforward. Slight nuances there. No, nothing dramatic, nothing extravagant, nothing that you haven't seen in some way, shape, or form before, but it just works really well. And you give the advanced variant of districts where you combined 2 of these colors to make the largest area and get points based off of that way. And it just really works. It's only 3 rounds, so it doesn't overstay its welcome. First round, you draft the single tiles. Second round, you draft 2 of the double tiles. Third round, you draft more of the single tiles until your 5x5 fills up. That's it. Then you score points and you go until the end. Score pad. I actually use the score pad. I don't use score pads in a lot of games. I'm a mental math person. But the thing that irritates me is, right, you have this pencil and this total bar over here, right? This total square. It's a massive waste of space. It makes no sense why you would design it like that, especially if you give me so many of them. But you know, you're going to go through them in, you know, a dozen games or so, which you're not going to play a dozen games of this, but, you know, it just drawing lines down them makes it totally more functional. And as a Stonemaier thing, you'd think that that would be not something overlooked. But overall, the game, very impressive, actually, as a simultaneous, lightweight family game. And it'll be depth enough in the set collections. You're going to try and outdo each other without trying to sabotage each other because you're still dependent on your opponents in a nicely unique, but not at all take that sort of way, and it works really freaking well. So yeah, if you like that sort of thing, yeah, it's definitely worth a see. Is the replayability there? Yeah, absolutely. Is it functionally a dynamic different game every time? Heck no. Does it need to be? No. You know, you play this in 25-30 minutes, you go play something else. Come back to it in a month or 2, you're not gonna have to refresh the rules, it's gonna be easy to play, you can teach it to anyone, and some things like that just can't be valued enough in our hobby nowadays. Again, is it the best tile laying game I've ever played? Absolutely not. Is it probably going to stay in my collection because of the ease of accessibility and to be able to play it with anybody factor? Yeah, and that's nowadays more important than almost anything else. Next up, different avenue, same tile laying aspect of things. 12 tiles going for Darwin's wild ride in the footsteps of Darwin, as you're going to be evolutionary completing your own little player board here to fill out both publications, research, and victory points in Feldian buffet style, if you will. In front of you, you can see that the board is set up in a 3x3 grid. Essentially, all you do is you move your little sailboat around there to the sides. Now, the tricky part is, wherever the sailboat is at the beginning of your turn, then you get to face and take one of the 3 that is directly in front of it. So, the middle column here. But, choosing on which one I take, if I take the first one here, the snapping alligator turtle thing, then I move it 1 space because it's only 1 space away. If I would have taken, say, the parrot down here, and I put that on my board, I'll show you the board in a second, you move it 1, 2, 3. You'll notice on these tiles, there are going to be several different axes. You're going to be sort of set collecting, if you will. You have the type of animal, you have both the continent, as well as the lower right hand and potentially even lower left hand bonus. You're going to be drafting both animals as well as researchers to your board to set collect in many various ways, shapes, and forms. And here comes the tricky part, right? You may draft the same in the same position. And what I mean by that is you have a 4x4 grid here, 16 potential tile spots. But you already said, Chris, that you only get to draft 12 tiles. Well, yeah, you're not going to fill all these in. You have 16 plus the 3 researcher spots over here. And then you have all the other gizmos and gimmicks down here that are going to allow you to score in different ways and as well as mitigate to your best choice. So the tricky part is, as you draft these, whatever continent by whatever species it is, then you are going to slowly fill up this board. And as you either row or column collect, you're going to be able to get these 5 victory points for your research publication, even though I can't hold on to it. Now, the interesting aspect of this is you can potentially get this same type of bird in the same continent as another tile that you can put down. Only the bonus spaces in the lower right hand corner here are going to be what you score at the end. So if this was the top one in this stack at the end of the game, it's going to get me 2 victory points. However, if I had something else over it, even though that doesn't match up, let's pretend it does, then this is going to get me an immediate action of a guide, but it's not going to get me those 2 victory points that are underneath. But if you do stack it on top, you get to grab one of these side victory point conditions here as well, which is going to give you additional ways of scoring. Now, every point I get for one that's in the column of the Australias back over here. And that's the balancing act that you're going to be trying to do. Yeah, you're going to have guides that are going to help you. You're going to have additional researchers that are going to give you aids, but you're ultimately going to be, as I just showed you, moving the Darwin around, replacing these tiles as you grab them, and then moving it for your opponent, forcing them to grab in the tile or the row that you left them with. Now you can use your guides to potentially maneuver you backwards or forwards, or discard some that are in your place in the way. But how you do that, in which point salad buffet option you prefer, it's going to give you a couple of different ways of doing it. It's a pleasant game. It's a very nice game. I like the maneuvering around. I like the site collection. I like the stacking of the tiles on top of each other in order to not only get different bonuses, but also to get some of the other endgame scoring conditions in the first place that may actually get you more points than what the tiles do in the first place. And therein lies the problem, though. It was a nice game. It wasn't anything exciting. It wasn't anything overly encapsulating or enthralling. And it just left me feeling like there could have been something else that gave a little bit more nuance or a little bit overall strategy, because ultimately, you know, you're at the whim of the person in front of you, and then taking the best of three, which is also honestly rather straightforward at times too, and it's not going to give you that decision making that you necessarily want out of a game like this. It's going to be light, it's going to play style nice with a wide variety of folks, including families, gamers, and kids, but it's not going to give you the strategic depth that you're looking for either, especially if you want something even midweight in the first place. So ultimately, I love this tile laying, pulling it over, but the decision making was not as deep as I would have liked in the first place. And so for that reason, it's probably going to end up in the trade pile. Again, not because it's a bad game, but because I have ones that I feel like do it better overall. The pro of this game, yeah, I love the tile drafting from this board onto this board. The maneuvering of how many of these do I want to double overlay to get the other additional victory points? How many do I actually want to keep in terms of getting the rows and the columns? Because the more I do of one, the less I'm going to be able to do the other. The downside is, again, that you've got all these tiles here that, you know, the random draw, the random setup on here, the not as mitigatable circumstances as you may like are going to leave you a little bit high and dry at the same time in a ship-based game, and that's not necessarily a good thing. Metaphorically speaking, of course. Now, last up, grab your passports. Let's go. Globetrotting from the makers of Canvas, R2Y Games. And this is bringing you a slightly different gimmick from an aesthetic art side of things with this plastic globe that you can see in front of me that sort of does one of these things of that, right? What you're going to be doing is choosing one of 3 destinations, each of 9 rounds, and then choosing how you're going to get there from point A to point B, depending on which travel route you want to take, because you're going to have several at your disposal. But the trouble is with this game is that the gimmick, unfortunately, seems a little bit more prevalent than the gameplay, and that's unfortunate because the idea behind this is really, really solid, of using these 3 different lines to go from place to place, measure how far they are in terms of, you know, cost and time-wise it's going to take you to get there, sum that up at the end of the game, and, you know, see who can score the most objectives of going through various ways, points, and places in the first place. And the idea of it is very solid. The execution of it and the ultimate product is very tricky to utilize to its full extent. Lots of issues with keeping it together, even in this globe container, if you will. Lots of trouble with sometimes even just using your dry erase marker to sort of find 2 points that have to be along a straight line at the edge here to draw that in the first place. And just little things like that that take away from the immersion and the gain frustration, instead take away from the actual enjoyment of the game in the first place. There is a solid game of this line drawing buried under this. It's just a little bit too much aesthetic and not enough functional gameplay. Even though I love the connections, you have ways of mitigating, you have ways of doing multiplayer in terms of cooperation, if you will, of having, say, these festivals or these travel companions that get set out in between players to help them cooperate or earn bonus points depending on if you are in the right season as you're going along, or if you and your opponent both choose the same route at the same time with the same destination. So ways of mitigating that, along with different objectives that you're going to be utilizing and going through as you do this game in the first place. And just the variety is there, but it just, again, the execution of the production fitting with the gameplay left us just more frustrated as you're filling out your passport from one place to the next. And that's unfortunate because the production overall is high. So what do I mean by this? Well, here you've got the globe that you're going to be slowly tilting around, right? And you're going to be having to measure how far away it is based on these numbers around the outside. But if we tilt it to the side, that's just the side of things you're going to actually have to draw on. And you can see it gets a little bit tricky, not only to even hold it on the table here, but even maneuver it even further. And lining up 2 points along this globe that aren't exactly always easy to do is relatively tricky sometimes as you're trying to maneuver it around. And it just doesn't always work, and it doesn't make it easy. And then the globe starts breaking apart, and it just kind of isn't the way I wanted it to be in the first place. As much as I like the idea of choosing your paths, creating your own destinations, and linking them all together with objective-based point scoring, it just did not meet the mark in terms of expectations versus reality in front of me. So that's it. 5 games, 5 quick thoughts on them. There you go. Some of the new, some of the hotter, some of the slightly cooler, but a little bit of everything in between. That's all I got. Let me know. Comments, questions, or concerns down below. What do you think? Stay classy. Have a great freaking day. Thanks for watching. See you around.